For 100 years, communities across the country and beyond have held their silence. 2 minutes of contemplation and reflection to remember those that left, never to return, and those that did return and struggled to find their place in a changed world. Merton, a former pit village in County Durham, has also maintained this vigil over the centuries since the fighting of the Great War ended, remembering those that served, their fallen, and one extraordinary man, Victoria Cross recipient William McNally.
Whenever you mention a Victoria Cross winner in the village, everybody knows who you're talking about. You don't have to mention the name McNally. Everyone knows about it. And it's an inspiration to people in the village. And I personally am very, very proud and privileged to live in a village where we have a Victoria Cross that's been awarded.
William McNally, the fact that he went through what he did and repeated it, I mean, his leadership skills, but I mean, his selfless courage, comes back here, has his family here, part of this community, and still continues to contribute. That shows such a strength in a man.
On the 27th of October 2018, as the fierce winds blew and the sleet fell, the community of Merton gathered at its cenotaph to once again pay tribute to their Victoria Cross winner. As part of a national initiative, a commemorative Victoria Cross stone was unveiled by the Lord Lieutenant of County Durham, Sue Snowdon, honouring William McNally, a Merton pitman whose repeated acts of courage saw him receive the Military Medal and Bar, and just 2 weeks before the fighting of the Great War ceased, the Victoria Cross. Born in 1894, William's destiny looked to repeat that of his father before him, a life underground, working in the industry that had transformed County Durham, mining.
Merton was originally a farmstead, local farms and farmland, until 1838 when they sank the shaft at the pit. And that was the start of Merton. People
lived in tied cottages to the colliery, and if you didn't work at the colliery, then it was quite difficult to get somewhere to live.
Obviously, whoever was paying the best wage attracted the workers from village to village. When the Cornish tin mines closed, there was a ready source of trained miners who were used to working in harsh environments with the tools, and then they would then train the locals in the mining techniques.
Once they were here and they'd set up home, very few actually left the village.
The focus was earning money and a survival.
It was during this expansion that the McNallys finally reached Merton.
I think they originated from Yorkshire, and his father came to Merton when the coal mine opened. And his father worked the coal mine and he went to mine, and then both his sons, my dad and his brother, both worked down the mine.
Whether born into privilege or poverty, the outbreak of what would become known as the Great War would change the destiny of everyone. Initial mobilization saw the regular army, reservists and territorials quickly dispatched to the Western Front and beyond. Secretary of State for War Lord Kitchener recognized that these troops would be insufficient for what was to come, and so a campaign of mass recruitment began and Kitchener's army was created. Hundreds of thousands of men answered the nation's call. Shopkeepers, office workers and Durham pitmen alike were transformed into soldiers. Through the haze of a century, the variety of reasons why so many gave up their lives to fight can be difficult to understand.
Adventure, a chance to get out the village for the first time for some of the younger ones, to go to a foreign country, and just all pals together. They were offered new boots, new uniform, an overcoat, which apart from the work clothes and possibly a Sunday best was again unusual.
They would have people going round, rallying the crowds, invite everybody to come along, and then start recruiting people. Even having people in the audience who were part of it said, yes, I'll sign up. And everybody's like, what?
Yeah.
You know, and then ladies going around giving white feathers to people.
I wouldn't know what to do in that position, or how families dealt with it. You know, you wave one of your sons off, and away they go, and you think, well, it'll be back in a couple of months, and then they don't come back. That had to have an effect on other families in the village. But how they dealt with it, I really wouldn't know how they did that.
William McNally volunteered in Sunderland in early September 1914 and joined the 8th Battalion of the Yorkshire Regiment, better known today as the Green Howards. After training, he arrived in France in September 1915, and in July 1916 took part in the opening phase of the Battle of the Somme near to Contalmaison, where he was awarded the military medal for his bravery.
He rescued his commanding officer. He went over to no man's land and carried him back.
McNally's military medal action on the 10th of July 1916 during the Battle of the Somme, rescuing a fallen comrade, was repeated the following year in the Flanders mud of Passchendaele.
Similar sort of thing. A shell went off, buried a couple of them, and he dug them out and carried them back.
Now a sergeant in the Yorkshire Regiment, McNally's citation for his second award for bravery reads, "The trench occupied by this NCO's platoon was heavily shelled. One shell burst among him and his men, killing 1 and wounding 3. With complete disregard for danger, he got the remainder under cover and carried the wounded to safety. The following night at the same place, his trench was heavily shelled, and on 3 separate occasions he went to the rescue of men who had been buried and brought them to safety. The cool courage of this NCO is worthy of the highest praise and was a striking example to all ranks."
He was shot 3 times during his service and sent home to recover after each occasion, and then he went back for more.
If you'd getting wounded, come home, you'd think that would have been it. But to be patched up and then go back, he came back from the Somme wounded, patched up and went back to Passchendaele, sent home, patched up, went back again.
He was a sergeant, so he had a team of men which he was responsible for, and he must have felt a duty to get back with them, to lead them. So all sort of pals together and stay with them till the end.
The dramatic and unfolding events of the First World War meant that those at home had to respond accordingly. Total war resulted in all available resources being mobilized to continue the fight. Guns had to be fed with shells, uniforms had to be stitched, coal still had to be dug to feed the production machinery, and the wounded had to be treated at hospitals both home and abroad. Merton was very much part of this effort, providing fighting men, continuing to dig coal, and presenting work opportunities for women that, before the war, would have been unthinkable.
There was 1,300 men left Merton. 1,100 of those were from the colliery, and approximately 220 of those never returned. So it was a large proportion of the able-bodied men who were able to go. And the others who were left would either be too young or too old, or they needed the workforce at the colliery to maintain coal production for the war effort. So there would have been a certain amount that were needed and wouldn't have been allowed to leave. And as well, other women from the village who served in the munitions factories, who worked in the clothing factories making the garments for the soldiers, and other support industries for the war effort.
Alongside the women that worked for the war effort in Merton, there were those from the village that travelled far afield to do their bit. Nurse Elizabeth Elliott worked at Fazakerley Military Hospital in Liverpool, treating the wounded and patching up men like William McNally to go back to war, and those whose injuries would mean a new and challenging life awaited them. After his second act of extraordinary courage was recognised in late 1917, William McNally was sent from the Western Front to the Italian Front. It was here that once again his selfless actions would be recognised, this time with the highest award for valour that Great Britain can bestow, the Victoria Cross. Pinned down by a machine gun nest, Sergeant McNally acted.
Instead of the battalion taking heavy casualties by a frontal attack, decided single-handedly he would use the battalion to attract the enemy fire while he snuck out the trench, flanked them, and then took the machine gun out, saving any casualties from his own men.
The citation for William McNally's Victoria Cross states, "For most conspicuous bravery and skillful leading during the operations on the 27th of October 1918 across the Piave, when his company was most seriously hindered in its advance by heavy machine gun fire from the vicinity of some buildings on a flank, utterly regardless of personal safety, he rushed the machine gun post single-handed, killing the team and capturing the gun." Later, at Vasallo on the 29th of October 1918, when his company, having crossed the Monte Carlo River, came under heavy rifle and machine gun fire, Sergeant McNally immediately directed the fire of his platoon against the danger point, whilst he himself crept to the rear of the enemy position. Realising that a frontal attack would mean heavy losses, he unaided rushed the position, killing or putting to flight the garrison and capturing a machine gun. On the same day, when holding a newly captured ditch, he was strongly counterattacked from both flanks. By his coolness and skill in controlling the fire of his party, he frustrated the attack, inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy. Throughout the whole operation, his innumerable acts of gallantry set a high example to his men, and his leading was beyond all praise.
You don't go to a battle or a conflict and say, well, I'm going to win the Victoria Cross. You just don't do it. Circumstances on the field of battle, you can be put in a position where you know that if you don't do something, your comrades who are with you are going to be killed.
Before I do any of my research, I start with the citation. That's my first little piece of research, and I always start and I come away thinking, my goodness me, they're all totally selfless acts of the most incredible bravery.
Just 2 weeks after McNally's Victoria Cross actions, the fighting ended. After over 4 years of conflict and destruction, silence.
My grandfathers, they came back and they never spoke about it. Never once did they speak about it. So they were affected, and it must have had some impact on the families. It had to. And how they dealt with it, I just don't know. I really don't.
Those that returned to Merton from the war were welcomed home and did their best to resume their civilian lives. Victoria Cross recipient William McNally was among them.
There's a story that he came back on the train at the railway station, and the local band was all waiting on the platform. He got off the station before at Southampton and went in the pub and had a drink with his friend. And the band, when the train pulled in, the band was playing, he never got off.
So they had to send a car to pick him up, to bring him back. But obviously big celebration, the war's finished. VC winners coming home, along with a lot of military medal winners. So I think probably delighted that it was all over and all the boys were coming back.
The end of the conflict brought mixed emotions for Merton. Heroes, recognised and unrecognised, returned home to be feted by civic leaders and their loved ones. Those that had received telegrams telling them of tragic loss must have watched the parades and speeches with both sadness and relief. Amongst these families were the parents of nurse Elizabeth Elliott. On the very day that William McNally had begun his Victoria Cross action, she had succumbed to disease and was buried in Holy Trinity Churchyard, Merton. Her name, the only woman, carved with pride on the war memorial alongside the fighting men of Merton. William McNally's civilian life resumed. He returned to work at Merton Colliery, got married, and had 6 children. But what does having a Victoria Cross winning father mean? What kind of a man was he?
Obviously a very, very brave man, there's no doubt about it. But in later years, when we were a bit more grown up, I used to say to him, tell us a bit more about your medals and so on like that. And he said, oh, we don't want to talk about that. And he wouldn't say a single word. Until the day he passed away, he would never talk about it. Never.
In 1920, he was called to form part of the Guard of Honour at the interment of the unknown soldier in Westminster Abbey. And there was 100 VC recipients asked to form that guard.
He didn't like fuss. If he was in a club, there'd be a crowd around him. That was just the bloke he was, but I wouldn't say that was anything related to his medal.
He was a man's man, definitely a man's man. You know, the usual thing, the pub every night, 7 o'clock, came back 10 o'clock. You know, he just seemed to take it all in his stride. And we didn't feel any different. I mean, we were only children in any way. We were always well looked after. Nobody was allowed to touch us. If the kids in the street hit us, or go out there and hit them back. That sort of thing, you know.
On the 5th of January 1976, aged 81, Sergeant William McNally, VC, died.
The army carried his coffin into the church, draped with the Yeoman flag. They played the last post, the bugler. It was, I think there was even talk of carrying the coffin on the gun carriage, but I think the family said no. I don't know why.
Over the course of the last century and the years since William McNally's death, Merton has gathered at its cenotaph to honour those that served in both World Wars and in other conflicts. Every November, and most recently for the Great War Centenary commemorations, along with the VC Stone unveiling in October 2018, the community has stood in silent contemplation.
I think it's pride, and it's pride in what the men did at that particular time. And I think people are grateful for that, and so rightly they should be.
Nearly every street in Merton lost somebody in the First World War. Sometimes it could be 2 or 3 people in the street. Sometimes even 2 or 3 people from a particular household didn't come back.
I think for me, one of the important things was that our young people had an understanding of these acts and the sacrifices that had been made by many in their communities. They needed to know this and have that understanding about why we look at remembrance and why we pay those tributes.